I'm Suffolk County Legislator Jay Schneiderman, and welcome to South Fork Focus, where we take a close look at issues affecting our area and groups that are working on addressing those issues. Today our focus is on youth, and I'll be talking with two individuals, Kim Laube, who's the Executive Director of an organization called HUGS, and Nancy Lynott, who's the Director of Southampton Youth Bureau. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So youth, our children, our teenagers, always a challenging time. They probably say that about every generation. You know, we think about how hard it was when we were kids. Today's youth are facing so many different things.
Oh, yeah.
All the social pressures, all the the gangs and the drugs, the economy and whether they'll find jobs, in the schools, all the pressure on testing and conformity. It's really a challenging time. Is it more challenging now than ever, or do we always just say that?
Sure. So talk to any adult or most adults, and if you ask them if they ever want to go back to their teen years or their preteen years, I haven't found too many who said, yep, I want to relive middle school again, or I want to relive those challenges again. And we certainly had challenges back in the day, but today's challenges are different. They're oftentimes more frequent. There's an instant kind of world that kids live in with lots of media input from all sorts of different sources. And so when you have to navigate through that and you hear different things about what to do and what not to do, the problem is, unfortunately now with all those different media sources, there's so many messages out there. And so for young people to navigate through all that different stimulus and all those different sources of information and try and make the best decisions, sometimes it is more challenging for them today.
I wonder, on the East End, there are issues that are, I won't say don't affect other regions, but they might be more acute here. The kids in school, the disparity between rich and poor, some kids, their parents are driving Ferraris, and the other kids are taking the bus. You've got kids who are going home to 20-room mansions, and other kids who are going home to small houses with 20 people living in them. Mm-hmm. Do you find that creates more extreme problems for these kids, more depression or more escapism kind of issues?
I was actually at a workshop with one of the leading researchers on youth violence last week, and he said in his comments that one of the biggest risk factors is economic inequality, those stark differences that you were just talking about that really makes kids feel more marginalized and that they matter less somehow.
But I bet it's not just the poorer kids that are resorting to negative behaviors, but I bet it's also some of those kids from those rich families that are also engaging in alcoholism and other things. I know, Kim, you've done a lot of work with alcoholism and with kids, and I saw some of the statistics, and they were pretty alarming for our area. Particularly West Hampton and some of the western, but maybe East Hampton as well, in terms of, I guess you did a survey.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Nancy and I both can speak to this because we've done a statewide survey, but the town has also spent a lot of time doing a townwide survey as well. And it's certainly not East versus West End of the East End. It is equal across the board.
Okay.
And so kids on the East End, they tend to drink and drug higher than those of their partners up west, in the county, in the state, and in the nation. And when we look at those numbers, there's groups of us who've been spending a lot of time saying, but why? Why here?
Right.
Why are kids on the East End? And everybody, when they think of the Hamptons, they think of the beaches and the beautiful towns, and we absolutely have those things. And yet we have tourism that's surrounded around come party in the Hamptons and the alcohol density that's
Every
out
magazine you pick up, it's got all these pictures of everybody partying, and all these nightclubs. Yeah.
And even if you start from before you even get to the Hamptons, you ride out in the buses with the big pictures of vodka on the side of it that all say come party in the Hamptons. And many people you speak to have a Hamptons story. And so we tend to socialize with it a lot as adults. We have a lot of clubs around it. The industry is based on it. So there's a high point of availability. And then comes into the factors of some parents are working 2, 3, 4 jobs just to afford to continue to live out here. And so there's young people who aren't being supervised. And then there's young people working in the industry itself. So there's tons of exposure when you're working as a bar back or you're working as a bus person. So the availability is present.
There's always somebody's parents who's got a stock liquor cabinet and they party at that house.
Well, and that's a big part too. It's not only just folks renting prom houses out here or renting graduation houses out here. here. Let's talk about that fully stocked house, and let's talk about, oftentimes parents, well-meaning, feel, well, at least if they're drinking in our home, we know that they're safe.
Sure.
And that's actually, although on one hand, people could
Well,
argue
we
and
actually
say,
have a law at the county. We passed the social host law that makes it a crime to enable that underage person to drink.
and that fine was just increased, and we appreciate that, because it has to have the teeth behind it. And so social host law, getting clear information out to parents
But
about.
we could pass law after law. I mean, it's illegal for these kids to drink
Sure.
and do drugs, but they still are getting access
Well-
to both drugs and alcohol. Let's go back to the survey for a second. Do you have a sense in terms of a percentage of how many kids, underage kids, are drinking out in our area?
Oh, certainly. And
You
I'll
have
let
lots of
Nancy,
numbers.
you have lots of numbers, both at Nancy's
Let
level
me
and
hear
our
some
level.
numbers.
but-
I'm a numbers person, so.
Well, in the last survey that we did in Southampton Township, which was in December of 2011, 80% of high school seniors reported using alcohol, which is, phenomenally high. And juniors was a bit lower, and we actually have seen a decrease in 8th and 10th grade reports of alcohol
that's a
use.
good sign.
But that is a good sign. But it's still around 50%, which is ridiculous.
And when you say even 80%, are these kids who are saying that they've tried it, or are these kids who are saying that they've repeatedly used?
These are kids that have said that they've tried it. 50% of the seniors said that they use alcohol currently, which means within the last 30 days. When we ask the question on a survey, we ask them what their use pattern is in the last
Okay.
30 days, and that's considered
So
current.
let's look at two sides of this issue. One is, why they're drinking, and two is, what are we going to do about it? So let's start with, why are they engaging in these behaviors?
Well, one of the things that I was going to add earlier when Kim was talking about the party atmosphere of the Hamptons, we do also know from this research that adult role modeling is really important. Kids, what the adults in around them in their lives do affects the decisions kids make. So when all the adults in their lives are out partying and drinking, that's the behavior they model.
But isn't drinking
So-
often linked to depression as well? If somebody feels
It
that
can
they have
be,
no future,
certainly.
they have no place, no purpose, then they suddenly, start to engage in these kinds of behaviors.
Definitely, with all substance use, there is a link
Kind of a mental
to
health
self-treat, sort of self-medicating for, trying to counteract the effects of mental illness. That is definitely a factor. It's not necessarily the primary factor, but it is
I'm not
definitely
even
a factor.
so much saying mental illness per se, which sounds like a clinical diagnosis. Just general depression.
Or general stress. Let's talk about how many
Stress.
families
Stress
are
is
just.
probably
if a
the
kid
number
feels
one
like,
factor.
they're just going nowhere in their life, and then it's, alcohol can be an escapism. The drugs can be an escape from that life. I mean, you do a
Well,
lot of
yes,
work
they
on the
can be.
counseling side, don't you? Or
Nancy's
more.
programs have more on the counseling side. We work primarily on prevention. And once folks hear drug and alcohol prevention, they think, oh, that must be for the at-risk kid. And the truth is, it's the same as young people wearing seatbelts or us wearing seatbelts. It's the same as putting sunblock on. It's the same as wearing, using a car seat, for instance. It's just another level of health protection that's out there, as addiction is a disease.
Our philosophy is that all kids are at risk, and they really are. When you have 80% of your high school seniors
Sure.
saying that they've used alcohol, that's all
And
kids.
it's not just alcohol. So let's talk about some of the other negative behaviors that kids are getting into. We have obviously drugs and we have alcohol. Energy drinks, which we just passed a law at the county prohibiting the sale of energy drinks to minors within the parks, and we're going to try to do some education as well countywide. We also passed a law prohibiting the direct marketing to minors in Suffolk County, and I think that was a good law. That was sponsored by Doc Spencer, a new legislator from the Huntington area. So energy drinks, heroin. Are we seeing heroin use on the East End? I know in Suffolk County we are seeing a bit of a heroin epidemic. So.
High school students in Southampton report a heroin use rate of about 4%.
Still, that
So-
even 4%. That's
Yes,
alarming
definitely.
to me.
That's 4 out of every 100 kids. That's a significant
here.
number. Yes, it's here. It's not.
It's here. What about gangs? Are we? Seeing gang
Actually,
activity?
gang behavior in Southampton, when we first started asking kids about it in 2005, it was up at 9%. When we asked it again in 2011, it was down to 4%. So we have seen a decrease in kids reporting gang involvement. That's what we asked them, are you involved with a gang? So we've seen a decrease in that. But I will say in the last year, we've seen there's been a little bit more overt evidence of gang activity in some of the neighborhoods that we work in. So although maybe less kids are affiliating themselves, the ones that are there are maybe becoming a little more active.
What about, I was going to ask about marijuana. Is that a problem in the schools?
I don't know about in the schools necessarily. Certainly,
Young people using
it's
it.
the second drug of choice for kids in our communities. It's the second most used drug. And what we see, too, when we ask kids about their perception of risk, they see little to no risk in using marijuana. It's up in like 70%, which indicates that if they don't see a risk, we're probably going to see
and that's
use
more
go
use,
up.
and that's a gateway drug too that often leads to some of these other drugs.
The national discussion about legalizing marijuana, too, has really changed kids'
And
attitudes
where are
about
they
it.
getting it? I mean, it's still illegal.
It is still illegal.
Are you seeing, there was some news about synthetic marijuana not that long ago. In fact, I passed a law at the county level prohibiting the sale of synthetic marijuana. It looks like potpourri. They sell it in these little packets.
Right.
And it's basically various benign herbs that are sprayed with a chemical that mimics PCB.
Right.
So kids smoke it and they get high from it, and it was legal. It's actually, I guess they still can get it, right?
They still can
They
get
just-
it, and in our survey that we did in 2011, it was the third most reported used substance by kids. This was the first time we'd asked about it, so we can't compare it to the past to say whether use has gone up or down, but they're using it.
We had prohibited the sale of another substance called, I want to say Salvia dolorium,
Salvia.
sage.
That was years ago. You were the
which
first in the nation.
Was a hallucinogenic. It was a plant that was for sale, legal, still legal nationally, I think. There's some areas that banned it like we have. Are you seeing any use of that?
I don't hear reports too much of that. I mean, the primary report I always hear is alcohol #1, marijuana #2, synthetic marijuana, and more reports from parents of coming to us about young people who've used the synthetic marijuana and just neurologically, young people not bouncing back from it and not being the same. And it has lasting effects.
What about robo-tripping that was in the news years ago? We actually created a law that require cough medicines be behind the counter, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, and let's just take a step
you
back
know,
just a
I'm not
little
sure
bit.
that most people know what that is, but that was a real problem for a while.
Sure.
People were getting, high off of cough medicine? Something in cough medicine, and
They still do.
they still do?
And the Sudafeds and
And
all the
then I saw something the
endorphins.
other day in the news about
Over-the-counter
cinnamon.
drugs.
Did you hear about that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
People trying to swallow cinnamon,
cinnamon
and
challenge.
apparently
Or
that.
snorting it really quickly.
Well, again, and
I mean,
it's
I
very
guess if
common.
kids want to hurt themselves, they find ways to abuse their bodies and their minds.
We live in a culture where it's really ideal to now take a video of yourself doing something outrageous, popping it up on YouTube and seeing how many likes you can
Right.
get. So that's where the social media definitely plays an influence. And you mentioned all the past drugs, and for some we've had some real success over and we've moved forward to. But there's always going to be a drug of the day. There's always going to be a way to get high of the day. And unfortunately, it's coming at a costly place. And we continue to treat the symptomology of it. We continue to deal with what are kids doing, what are they using, how are they getting it. But until we really begin to change culture and perception and norms and really begin to give communities the tools they need to rebuild and to change, then we're going to continue to deal with, as one of my colleagues calls the whack-a-mole, like it's the drug that pops up of the
Sure.
day that we have to go in and
Right,
attack.
they find ways to put themselves at risk.
Absolutely.
You know.
And the more we can really begin to mobilize communities for
So
change.
right, so we have to look at why they are putting themselves at risk, and that's something that Hugs really works on, right? So
Sure.
it creating that sense of community, addressing the roots. The roots of what really we've been talking about, the symptoms, but you guys look at the the real roots of the problem. So what HUG stands for?
Human Understanding and Growth Seminars.
Okay, and you do a lot of work in the schools. Yeah?
A lot of work in the schools, a lot of work in the community. We're all over. You ask us to be there. We love talking about this stuff. We love talking about solution, and we love empowering young people with the tools they need to navigate through life. So from assemblies to school workshops to parent groups to PTA to just a group of folks at your house, we'd love to sit down and talk about the solutions and what we can do to begin to change and be the winds of change that are needed, especially on the East End.
So do you guys reach out to the schools, or they come to you? How does it?
Both. We're a very, very small staff, so our outreach is minimal compared to what we would love for it to be one day. But schools mainly call us word of mouth. Folks hear us present, and they're like, "Oh, I want to get you into our school and into our classrooms."
Right. Do they usually put you in with a group of at-risk kids, or they just go right into the regular classroom?
General population, and that's really where my focus is.
No, that's important. So basically, you're going into a regular classroom and you're talking to kids.
Yep.
And you make them aware of some of the programs you have. Okay, so tell
absolutely.
me a little bit about those programs.
Sure. So our signature program is this weekend-long leadership camp, and we do it 5 times a year. Students can choose to join us once, or they can join us multiple times. It's peer-led, peer-facilitated. And here's, I believe young people when they talk to me. I believe what they say. I take them at face value. And what young people tell me all the time is they want to belong. And even we as adults kind of like when we feel like we have a place we belong and we fit in and we're comfortable. And so what this particular program does is it gives young people a place where they belong just for who they are. So we'll have kids out on our seminars who are from all walks of life, from young people who are interviewing with Harvard and Yale, to young people who are going to go go intern in a tattoo parlor. And all across the board we have them. And we believe that if we can begin to shift those young people in each of their ways and really give them clear, accurate information about substance abuse, about bullying, about being a leader, about protective factors, we can each send them back to each of their individual groups, and they can be agents of change in that particular group. Some of them do it very loudly, and they get really involved with different leadership groups like the Youth Advisory Council that the town has, and some of them just wind up being a better listener to one of their peers who's going through a challenge. And so these weekends become really powerful.
No, you do this is on Shelter Island?
That's on Shelter
these
Island.
seminars, and I actually went to one.
You did?
Last May.
Yeah.
Right, and
And you survived. You
and
handled 80 teenagers in one spot.
I did.
And you
I
survived.
got to speak with the kids, and it was in a beautiful setting. And I actually learned a lot from the kids because I got to ask them a lot of questions. So, my background's in education, but I think I was the one being taught that day, and it was really I learned about the program, and I got to ask the kids all kinds of questions about stuff that was going through their mind and what they needed. So it was really informative to me.
What Kim alluded to, what I think is really valuable about HUGS is that it really gives kids a place where they feel like they belong, where they're part of something, they're learning to be part of something that's important. And I think that's one of the things that we have to watch out for with kids is feeling marginalized, feeling like they don't matter or they don't belong. I referenced that before, but I think that's a big deal in what we need to try to address when we're working with kids. And we refer a lot of kids to HUGS because I think they're really, really good at doing that.
Yeah, no, there's a great sense of community there.
Yeah.
And kids were really becoming leaders, and they were, I can't remember what they did with like pieces of yarn you would tie around.
Warm fuzzies, sure.
The warm fuzzies, they'd put them around each other's necks.
Yeah, and just, we live in a world where we talk very sarcastically and we're always just joking and just teasing and sometimes by the end of the day that stuff gets a little tiresome. And so that atmosphere out there is all about really talking about what's good and what's right. And so a warm fuzzy is a compliment. It's a way of saying, I value you, I like you, you're an important person, as opposed to what the kids would call cold pricklies, which are those teasing, jabbing, jarring kind of things that after a while begin to break a person down. And that sense of community that happens out there is so profoundly powerful. And the only reason that program happens is because of our volunteers. And that's something that really, and you alluded to it too, we always tell our volunteers, you never know when you're going to be the teacher and you never know when you're going to be the student.
Sure.
And that's really powerful because the adults give of their weekends, they give of their times. Folks like Nancy and her staff and many others across Suffolk County come and they give of their whole weekend to just be part of this amazing experience. And even though they're working and volunteering, by the end of the seminar, they have that shot in the arm that they need.
Yeah.
There's a different spring in their step, and it just kind of aligns you with what's right in the world and what the next right
Yeah, I
thing
got the
to do
feeling
is.
that there were kids there that weren't from the most supportive families, or, and this was really the first time they were feeling a sense of community, where they could stand up in front of a room and everybody would applaud, right? And they feel like, hey, I'm valued. I'm important. I can contribute in a positive way. And I think that is a big piece of it all.
Think about how we would all thrive so much better working in those kinds of environments.
Exactly. So Nancy, you are involved with Southampton Town. It's a
Right.
municipal government and the youth bureau there, and you've been director for a number of years.
12 years.
12 years, wow.
Right.
And you do a lot of outreach too, and you work with a lot of different agencies. So can you tell us a little bit about the kind of work that Southampton Youth Bureau does?
Yes, we're really a multi-service youth development agency. We do everything from, we have youth centers, we have counseling programs, we have a youth court program that provides early intervention for young offenders. We have a teen drama troupe. So we do social recreational activities. So we really try to provide, our job really is to ensure that services are available to kids in Southampton Town that promote their healthy development and prevent their decisions to engage in risky behaviors. So there's a lot of different factors. There's not any one tool that you can use to do that. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. So that's what we're doing. We also support other youth agencies by either technical assistance, sometimes with funding. But our feeling is that the more people out there providing services to kids, the better off we are. So we work with organizations like the Riverhead Community Awareness Program, who not only does a great prevention program in schools and in Phillips Avenue, which is in Southampton too, but they also have counselors, social workers in these schools that work with kids one-on-one. I think you need both. Also, there's Sag Harbor Youth Center and the Yard program, which are now in the process of becoming one program, which is very exciting to serve kids in South Sag Harbor.
You and I have been going to lots of meetings.
Yes, we have, but it's
the right thing.
I'm very excited about
together.
what's going to come out of it. I think the two organizations, the staff of the two organizations working together are going to provide a great service for kids in Sag Harbor, the same kinds of services that we've been talking about here today. There's also Bridgehampton Child Care Center is doing some after-school programming. SYS actually does after-school programming for kids that's broader, not just about athletics, but providing safe places for kids to be during the after-school hours. So we work with a lot of those agencies, supporting what they do. Sometimes we're providing financial assistance. Sometimes we're helping with the staffing. But our job is to make sure they're successful. Or to help them be successful.
Do you do
That's the way
anything
we
with
look at it.
mentoring or apprentice, where kids can actually go and work with somebody and learn a trade or a skill?
Well, we do have our employment program that we call Broader Horizons, and that's where we provide kids with jobs in the summertime. And we reach out to the community to get local businesses involved as well, who can provide those kinds of mentoring opportunities for kids. We've had kids work in a television studio. We've had kids work in doctors' offices. Historical museums, different places where there's also the animal shelter. We've had kids work there. But the idea is to give the kids a work experience that teaches them some job skills, but also exposes them to career paths that they might be interested in. So we do have that program. We do involve kids in some internships, unpaid, during the school year too, but that's a small program right now. We'd love to see it expand. But I do think that, there's lots of avenues for kids to take after high school. If going to college is your thing, that's great. But if it's not, there are other things that are productive that you can do. And so we hope to help kids get into those opportunities.
Do you feel like those programs that you're supporting are being successful? Or you're seeing, the fruits of your labors?
Well, yes, I do. I think that not only do we have a great response from the kids, their families, and the folks in the community that we work with, but I think that the surveys that we've been doing every 3 years do indicate that kids are feeling more connected to their community. Some of the risk behaviors are decreasing. I think that they, it is responding, and it's not just us. It's our work that we do with Hugs and the work that we do with all the other organizations as a youth development community that I think is important.
And I want to speak to that, and specifically for Southampton Youth Bureau. We, on the East End, our youth agencies are certainly working at their max. We're at our limit, and there's really not much more we can squeeze out of them than we already have. Nancy's group, the Youth Bureau, has been able to really, when we've had ideas like the East End Youth Leadership Summit or the East End Gang Awareness and Violence Prevention Conference, that for any one of our agencies, we couldn't have done it by ourselves. We coordinate, we all work collaboratively together on committees and coalitions to really bring about that change in the community, to bring those different programs, and we do it together in collaboration through the Youth Bureau's leadership, which is it's such an asset to the youth serving population, because we can't do it on our own, but together we certainly can work and make it happen.
Now, if people want to learn about the Youth Bureau or find out what programs are upcoming, they can do that through the town's website?
Yes. Yep, it's southamptontowny.gov/Youth Bureau.
Okay, we'll put that up so people don't have to quickly jot that down. But,
That's right. And we actually, our next big event is going to be June 7th at Ponquag Beach, where we have high school bands in a competition. So, and we have some local musicians that help us out with hosting that event. So that's one way that we work to get kids involved in productive activities that are a little bit non-traditional.
That's right. And what about Hugs? If somebody wants to volunteer, get involved with Hugs,
Sure.
take advantage of those seminars. Yeah. So how do they
Absolutely.
find?
Sure.
Get connected to those things.
We'd love a volunteer to build our website, so then we could actually
there
give
you
you a
go.
There you
website now.
go.
So there's a start. But certainly they can call us at our office in West Hampton Beach. We've
go ahead.
631-288-9505. So they can reach us there. We, again, we're available by phone. You can come to our office and visit us, and that's how you find out.
Oh, that's great. Well, Kim, it's been a pleasure having
thank
you
you.
on the
Thank
show.
you for having us.
Nancy, thank you for coming
Thank
on as
you.
well. It's an interesting conversation.
Yes, something we need to keep talking about.
Yeah.
Definitely
Definitely.
get in the public eye.